Racist cop brings the wrong black man to court, then learns he's a federal prosecutor. That was the first thing anyone heard when the courtroom doors slammed open. The bailiff's eyes shot up. Judge Carolyn Vargas dropped her pen. Conversations died mid-sentence. The silence that followed felt like the air had been vacuumed out of the room. Officer Bradley Keene stood at the center of it all, hand gripping the upper arm of a tall black man in a slate blue suit. The man's face was calm, composed, but there was something beneath it. Something electric. A fury wrapped in stillness. Keene didn't know it yet, but the next 60 seconds would burn themselves into every eye watching. "Remove his cuffs," the man said, voice low but steady. "Controlled." Keene scoffed. He was evading. "Officer," said a voice from the judge's bench. It was Judge Vargas, leaning forward now, fingers laced in front of her. "You will do as he says." Immediately, Keene looked around, confused. "What?" "He's." The man pulled a leather badge case from his inner pocket with his cuffed hands and let it drop open. "Anthony Stokes, U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York." Gasps rippled across the gallery. "What the hell did you just do?" Judge Vargas asked, her voice ice cold. Keene's mouth worked, but no sound came out. Anthony Stokes looked him dead in the eye. "You better have a damn good reason for putting your hands on me." The courtroom froze. Cameras blinked. Journalists shifted in their seats, scribbling. And then, like it had just occurred to him, Stokes asked, "Where's the man you were actually looking for?" 3 weeks earlier, Anthony Stokes stood at his mother's gravesite in Baltimore, his shoes sinking into the wet spring soil. The cemetery smelled like grass and old stone. A breeze tugged at his coat. There were only 6 people there, counting him. His cousin Sierra read something soft and biblical. He didn't really hear it. His mother, Darlene, had died quiet. No car crash, no violence. Just a heart that gave out while folding laundry in her living room. The paramedics said she didn't feel it. He didn't believe them. Stokes hadn't made it in time to say goodbye. He'd flown down the night he got the call, but it was already too late. His mother had died on a Thursday. He got there Friday morning. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was something deeper, emptier, like a thread had been pulled from the middle of him, and now everything inside sagged just a little. The funeral ended quickly. Small, the way she'd wanted. No pastor, no choir, just family and the neighbor who always brought over collards. Afterward, he helped his uncle load the fold-up chairs into the van. "I hate that you had to fly down for this," Uncle Reggie said, lighting a cigarette as he leaned on the van. "Your mama was proud of you, you know." "I know. She said you were like, what's his name? Obama, but meaner." That got the smallest twitch of a smile. "She would." Reggie flicked ash into the grass. "You staying a few days?" Stokes shook his head. "Flying back tonight." Reggie just nodded, like he already knew. He looked tired. Everybody did. That night at BWI, Anthony sat at the gate in his suit, tie loosened, watching the CNN ticker roll across the screen with updates on some big case out west. He should have been working. Cases don't pause for grief. Not federal ones. He leaned back, rubbed his face, and texted his assistant to reschedule the 9 a.m. deposition. Then he turned his phone off for the first time in months. He returned to New York quieter than he left. Back to the office, back to the courtroom. The grind came easy. The silence afterward didn't. At home, he drank more tea than whiskey now. He left the TV on for noise. He fell asleep on the couch a few nights in a row. Then, one Thursday, it started. He'd left work late. Subway delays pushed him to take a lift back to his brownstone in Crown Heights. As he stepped out near his place, someone called to him. "Hey." He turned, half expecting a neighbor. It was a cop. White, lean, shaved head under a navy cap, standing by an unmarked car. A second officer, shorter, stockier, stayed in the car. "You got ID?" Anthony stared at him. "Excuse me. You match the description of someone we're looking for. Just need to check ID real quick." Anthony gave a tired smile. "You don't." "I'm not him." "Sir," the officer said, stepping closer, "ID." "No," Anthony said calmly. "Not without knowing why you stopped me." That was all it took. Before he knew it, he was facing the hood of the car, hands yanked behind him. Cold steel bit his wrists. He kept saying the same thing. "You're making a mistake." Voice even. "No panic." "Sure we are," the cop muttered. "Call your supervisor," Anthony said. But he knew how this would go. He'd seen it too many times. He'd prosecuted it. Only this time, he was in the cuffs. The ride was quiet. No Miranda. No explanation. just a tight back seat and the weight of disbelief pressing down on his chest. At the precinct, it got worse. They didn't run his ID, didn't listen when he told them his name. They logged him under another. "I'm not Derek Lantham," Anthony said again and again. "You've got the wrong man." But Officer Keene, he finally caught the name, didn't seem to care. Or believe him. Or both. They took him to court the next morning. Early. No phone call. No lawyer. Still cuffed. Still disrespected. They didn't know who he was. And Anthony didn't tell them. Not yet. Because somewhere inside, beneath the anger, something cold and focused had taken root. He wanted to see just how far they'd take it. How far a system would go when it saw a black man first and everything else second. And as they led him into the courtroom, dressed in the same suit he wore to bury his mother, Anthony Stokes knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't just going to walk out of there. He was going to make sure no one forgot what they did to him. The handcuffs clicked tighter than they needed to. Anthony didn't flinch. Officer Keene guided him down the narrow hallway behind the courtroom, the way you'd escort someone dangerous. The silence was thick, just the occasional radio squawk and the sound of Keene's boots echoing off the floor. Anthony could hear the courtroom ahead, muffled voices, papers shuffling, someone coughing. It smelled like cold coffee, bleach, and nerves. "You nervous?" Keene asked without looking back. Anthony didn't answer. They reached the courtroom doors. Keene pulled one open and nudged him forward. And just like that, they stepped into the storm. "Remove his cuffs," Judge Vargas said again. Her voice sharpened now with something unmistakable, authority. Keene hesitated. Anthony turned slowly, looked at the bailiff. "Would you like to do it?" The bailiff didn't wait for Keene to answer. He stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs with a practiced click. Anthony rolled his wrists once, like he was dusting off the memory of it. "You want to tell us what happened here?" Judge Vargas asked, her gaze fixed on Keene. Anthony stepped forward instead. "Your Honor, if I may, please." He turned toward the gallery and addressed the court like he had 100 times before, but never like this. "I was arrested yesterday evening outside my own home. No probable cause. No explanation. I told Officer Keene my name. I told him he had the wrong person. He chose not to believe me. He chose to ignore protocol. And then he brought me in, booked me under someone else's name, and delivered me here, in handcuffs, in front of a courtroom full of my colleagues." A whisper ran through the benches. Someone stood in the back to get a better view. "I am not Derek Lantham," Anthony continued. "I am Anthony Stokes, Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And I am going to press every charge the law allows." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Keene looked like a man who just realized the floor was missing. That was when Anthony looked at the public defender's table. There, in a wrinkled shirt and torn jeans, sat the real Derek Lantham. The two men locked eyes. Anthony blinked, just once. Why was Lantham smiling? 3 weeks earlier, Anthony stood in front of his childhood home for the first time in years. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The bricks were cracked in places, and the porch sagged a little. His mother's hydrangeas were still alive, though, just barely. He didn't go in. He just stood there with the key in his hand and a lump in his throat that hadn't moved since the funeral. The house had been left to him. No mortgage, no debts. Just a bunch of memories he wasn't ready to touch. He turned the key over in his hand and put it back in his pocket. Back in New York, the days blurred. A month before the arrest, Anthony was neck-deep in a trafficking case involving a mid-level drug ring and a few dirty city cops. The usual friction. A couple of media hits. Some pressure from above. Nothing new. But something had changed in him since the funeral. He was quicker to anger, slower to forgive. And when the NYPD liaison gave him the runaround for the 3rd time on discovery documents, he snapped. "You want to play dumb with me?" he said, voice rising just enough to quiet the room. "Try it. I've got time." That wasn't like him. He usually stayed colder, calculated. But lately, everything felt like it came with a splinter. He'd started jogging again just to burn it off. Mornings through Prospect Park, AirPods in, hoodie up. Even then, he noticed how the cops looked at him when he passed. That quiet tension, like they were trying to decide whether to nod or reach for something. And now he was standing in a courtroom where one of them had made the wrong call and dragged him here for the world to see. Back in the present, Judge Vargas turned to Keene. "Do you have anything to say?" Keene straightened. He refused to show ID. Matched the description. "Did you run his name?" "I was going to." "When?" "After the arraignment." Keen didn't answer. Vargas took a breath and leaned back. You'll stay here until I've had a full review of this incident. Bailiff, escort Officer Keen to holding. The room exploded with murmurs. Journalists started typing. Keen stood frozen for half a second, then nodded stiffly and walked out. Anthony turned to leave, but before he did, Judge Vargas said, "Counselor?" He looked up. "I'm sorry this happened." For the first time all morning, his expression softened. "Thank you, Judge." Then he walked straight past the stunned faces, past the reporters already dialing numbers, past the court officers who now wouldn't meet his eyes. He stepped out into the hallway, exhaled deeply, and loosened his tie. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen. Unknown number. He answered. "Stokes." A voice replied, "We need to talk about Derek Lantham. He knows who you are, and he's been waiting for you." Anthony stopped walking. The line went dead. Anthony stared at the phone screen. The call already ended. No voicemail. No callback number. He stood frozen in the hallway outside the courtroom, surrounded by the echo of footsteps and rustling papers. Reporters had started to gather near the elevator, whispering behind cameras. A couple of junior attorneys looked his way and then quickly looked away. He turned toward the exit, phone still in hand, mind racing. "He's been waiting for you." Those 6 words crawled under his skin. Anthony had never met Derek Lantham in his life. Or so he thought. He walked out of the courthouse without another word, without even acknowledging the press that had started to line the steps outside. Cameras clicked as he passed, and someone shouted his name, but he didn't stop. His thoughts weren't on Keen anymore, or even the public humiliation. They were locked on one thing. Why would Lantham know who I am? Back in his apartment, Anthony dropped his keys on the counter and went straight to the kitchen. He poured a glass of water, didn't drink it, and stood there staring into the middle distance. He kept replaying that moment in the courtroom, Lantham's face. It wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. And that smile. Not smug. Not sarcastic. It was something else. Like he'd been expecting this exact moment. Like he was watching a piece fall into place. Anthony finally sat down, opened his laptop, and typed in Derek Lantham's name. There wasn't much in the system. A few priors, small stuff. Loitering, trespassing, minor possession. All within the last 6 years. No history before that. He dug deeper, accessing sealed documents only prosecutors could view. That's when it got strange. Lantham had once been a confidential informant, used by NYPD narcotics 6 years ago in a sting that fizzled. The records were thin, unusually so. Most disturbing of all, there was no arrest record under his name prior to 2019. Not a single trace of him in the system before that. People don't just appear. Anthony leaned back in his chair. Something wasn't adding up. 2 hours later, his phone buzzed again. This time the number was blocked. He answered. "Yeah. Glad you're home," said the voice. Male. Calm. Confident. "Who is this? You met him today?" "Derek. Or at least you saw him. He'd like to talk." Anthony glanced toward his window instinctively. "I don't meet with criminals without counsel present." The man on the line chuckled. "He's not asking for a deal. Just a conversation. He says he owes you an explanation." "Owes me?" There was a pause. "He says this all started with your mother." Anthony sat forward, breath caught halfway in his throat. "What did you say?" But the line was already dead again. He stood up slowly, his heart now fully racing. How the hell could Lantham know anything about his mother? 2 days passed with no word. Anthony kept working like nothing had happened, but the edge was always there. Every document he reviewed, every call he took, part of him was waiting, watching. He tried pulling more threads. He called in a favor from a contact at NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau. "Tell me about Keen," he asked. The woman on the other end, Detective Lauren Wexler, grunted. "Which part? The fact that he's had 6 complaints in the last year, or the one that got buried?" "Buried? Yeah." Civilian Review Board flagged him for misconduct. Video disappeared. Typical shuffle. "You ever hear of him working with a CI named Derek Lantham?" There was a pause. "Wait, how do you know that name?" "Call me back when you find something," Anthony said, and hung up. The next evening, he was walking home from the corner bodega when he saw the note. It was folded in half and taped to his apartment door. His name written in block letters on the front. Black ink. No envelope. He checked the hallway. Empty. He peeled it off and opened it. Crown Heights Library. Thursday, 6 p.m. Basement level. Come alone. Thursday came too fast. He walked into the library with nothing but a phone and a folded copy of the note in his pocket. His badge stayed at home. The place was nearly empty. Summer heat had driven most folks inside or to the streets. The AC hummed overhead. He walked past the shelves, down the narrow staircase at the back of the building. Basement level. Storage and old reading rooms. Half the lights were off. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. He stepped inside. There, sitting alone at a table under a buzzing fluorescent light, was Derek Lantham. The man looked up and smiled again. "Hey, counselor," he said, as if they'd met for lunch. Anthony didn't start talking. Derek leaned back. "Your mama's name was Darlene, right?" Anthony's stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" "She used to volunteer at the juvenile center on Fayette Street," Derek said. "Back when nobody else gave a damn. I was in there for 6 months. 17 years old. Stole a phone. Your mom came every Tuesday with books and cookies. Called me baby like I was hers." Anthony didn't speak. "She told me to get my GED. Told me I was worth something even when I didn't believe it. She was the first grown-up who didn't look at me like a waste." He paused. "And when I got out, she gave me your number." Anthony blinked. "No, she didn't." "She did," Derek said. "Said you were in law school. Said if I ever got in real trouble, I should call you. I never did. Not until now." Anthony's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Why now?" Derek looked him dead in the eye. "Because what happened to you, it was supposed to happen to me. And someone made sure it didn't." Anthony's heart started to race again. "What the hell does that mean?" Derek leaned forward, voice low. "You were never supposed to be the one in those cuffs. That arrest wasn't a mistake. It was a message." Anthony swallowed hard. "A message from who?" Derek looked away, then back. "You already know." Anthony stared at Derek, the silence in the room stretching thin. The hum of the overhead light buzzed just a little louder than before, like it was trying to fill the space neither of them wanted to break. "A message from who?" Anthony asked again, slower this time. Derek looked at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, like he was choosing every word with gloves on. "You're prosecuting something you shouldn't be," he said. "And there's people who think you don't scare easy enough." Anthony took a slow step forward. "Be more specific. You remember the Morales case?" Derek asked. 2 years ago. Big drug bust in Queens. Supposed to be a clean takedown. You buried a few middle guys, but the top names? They vanished. Like smoke." Anthony narrowed his eyes. "That case is closed." "Yeah," Derek said. "Because someone paid to close it." Anthony's stomach turned. "I remember the file. Morales flipped, then disappeared. Witsec grabbed him before we could get the names he owed us." Derek shook his head. "He never got to Witsec." "What?" "They pulled him. A week before your office filed the transfer paperwork. His name was gone. Not sealed, deleted. From every database." Anthony felt his mouth go dry. "You're telling me someone inside the federal system buried a cooperating witness?" "I'm telling you it started way before that. Morales wasn't the first. And he sure as hell won't be the last." Anthony backed away from the table and ran a hand over his jaw, trying to think. "You're not just some XCI, are you?" Derek hesitated. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I was recruited by a task force that doesn't exist. Or if it ever did, someone wiped the trail clean. 6 years ago, they burned it down and left people like me floating in the wind. No protection, no clearance, no identity. I had to survive however I could." Anthony shook his head. "This sounds like paranoia." "It would be," Derek said. "Except they just dragged you into it." Anthony's phone vibrated. He pulled it out of his pocket. It was Detective Wexler. He answered. "Wex, what do you have?" Her voice was tight. "We need to talk. Now. Not on the phone." "Why?" "Because Keen isn't just dirty. He's connected. And the files you asked me to pull? They're gone." Anthony felt it like a cold gust down his spine. "Gone how?" "Wiped. Not just from NYPD servers. Federal ones too. Like they were never filed." Anthony glanced at Derek, who watched him with the calm of someone who already knew. "You were right," Wexler said. "There's something bigger going on here. And I think they wanted you to find out the hard way." That night, Anthony barely slept. He sat at his desk in the apartment, staring at old case files. Pieces started to fall into place, not like a puzzle, but like a crime scene. The Morales case. The sealed testimony that never arrived. A confidential informant with no past. A street arrest with no probable cause. A missing witness. A deleted record. And now this. They wanted it to happen. Not a mistaken arrest. A test. The next morning, Anthony walked into his office building on Worth Street, like nothing was wrong. He nodded at the security guard, stepped through the scanner, and rode the elevator to the 12th floor. The second he stepped into his office, his assistant stood up. "There's a man waiting for you inside." Anthony paused. "Who?" He said he's with DOJ oversight. Didn't give a name. Anthony's heart skipped a beat. He walked in. A tall man in a gray suit stood by the window, hands folded behind his back. He turned as Anthony entered. "Mr. Stokes, good to finally meet you. Not really a great time." "Oh, I think it is." He walked forward, extended a hand. Anthony didn't take it. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Call me Mr. Evers. I'm here on behalf of a very specific section of the department. We've been watching your work." Anthony crossed his arms. "That's supposed to scare me?" "Not at all. In fact, we want to help you." "Help me with what?" "With your curiosity," Evers said. "You're getting close to something that's been buried for a long time. We don't want to stop you." "Really?" Evers smiled wider. "We want to offer you a choice." Anthony raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Walk away. Let the Morales file stay shut. Let the Keene incident be what it is. You'll be promoted inside of 6 months. A clean slate. Or what? Or you keep digging, and you find out what happened to the last man who did." Anthony didn't respond. Evers stepped back toward the window. "You're smart, Stokes. Smarter than the people who usually end up on our radar. So think carefully. The wrong choice here doesn't just affect you." Anthony stared at him. "Is that a threat?" "No," Evers said, looking out at the city. "It's a courtesy." Then he turned, walked past Anthony, and left without another word. 15 minutes later, Anthony was in the stairwell, calling Wexler. "We need to meet. Tonight." "Where?" "Somewhere no one can hear us." That night, they met on the Brooklyn Bridge promenade, where the wind from the river carried off most of what you said. Wexler handed him a file folder wrapped in a plastic bodega bag. "I printed everything before it disappeared," she said. "Hard copies only. You read it, you burn it." "What am I looking at?" "An internal investigation that never went anywhere. Names redacted. But you'll recognize the patterns." Anthony flipped through the pages. Half the words were blacked out, but the incidents, he remembered them. Officers reassigned after testimony went missing. Judges recusing themselves without explanation. Federal transfers that weren't requested. Each event tied to someone now unreachable. The last page made him stop cold. It was a photo. A black and white still frame of a woman in a Baltimore community center, holding a tray of cookies, surrounded by teenage boys. Smiling. His mother. She was flagged in the file, Wexler said. No criminal record. But someone was tracking her. Anthony felt his throat tighten. He looked out over the water, gripping the folder so tight it bent in his hands. His mother hadn't just helped Derek. She had gotten in the way. And now, so had he. Anthony couldn't feel the wind anymore. He stood frozen on the Brooklyn Bridge promenade, the file still clutched in his hand, the photo of his mother staring back up at him. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Darlene Stokes was a retired nurse who ran Bible study on Wednesdays and brought hot plates to anyone who needed them. She didn't traffic drugs. She didn't break laws. She broke bread. So why had someone flagged her? He looked at Wexler, who leaned against the railing, arms crossed, eyes locked on the city skyline. "How long have you known," he asked, "that they were watching her?" "I didn't. Not until I dug through those files." "Why was she even in them?" Wexler hesitated. "That's the thing," she said. "She's not mentioned by name, just referred to as an interference factor, linked to a suspected information leak inside a dormant DOJ operation. Same year Morales vanished. Same jurisdiction." "Jesus," Anthony muttered. "You think they thought she was the leak?" "I think they didn't know who the leak was, and she was close to too many people who had answers. Including you." Anthony paced in a tight circle, hands on his hips. "You're telling me my mother's name came up in a buried DOJ Black Ops file? And no one ever told me?" "No one was supposed to. That's the point of Black Ops files." He looked up sharply. "You ever wonder why you're still breathing, Wex?" She didn't blink. Every day, back in his apartment, Anthony laid everything out across his dining room table. Legal pads, red string, printed photos, case summaries. The file Wexler had given him. His mother's photo sat at the center like a sun, everything radiating out from it. He connected what he could. Derek Lantham, Juvenile Center, Darlene Stokes. Darlene Stokes, Morales arrest year, interference tag. Morales, sealed informant, erased from records. Officer Keene, bogus arrest, linked to Lantham. Lantham claims a black task force went dark. Anthony Stokes, prosecuting similar network now. And there it was. Not just a case. A cycle. Every 6 or 7 years, something like this bubbled up, an arrest, a trial, a dead-end file, and then it vanished. Records gone. Witnesses relocated or accidentally killed. Names sealed. Judges reassigned. Prosecutors promoted. Or fired. Or worse. He sat down and picked up the photo again. His mom looked younger there. Maybe 50. Still healthy. Her hair up. Soft eyes. He remembered the tray in her hands. That day, she came home crying. They asked me not to come back, she said. He was still in law school then. He hadn't understood. Who, he'd asked. But she never answered. He thought it was just burnout. He didn't ask again. Now he wished he had. The next morning, Anthony called in sick. He didn't go to the office. He didn't turn on his phone. Instead, he headed downtown, alone, to meet the only person left who could tell him something useful. Derek Lantham. But this time, he wasn't waiting in some basement library. This time, Anthony found him in a halfway house in Flatbush, a quiet brown building sandwiched between a closed laundromat and a bodega that only took cash. Derek sat on the front stoop, sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching a pigeon peck at cigarette butts. Anthony walked up and stood over him. You lied. Derek looked up, unbothered. About what? My mother. You didn't just meet her at a juvenile center. Derek sighed and scooted over on the stoop, patting the spot next to him. Sit down, counselor. Anthony didn't move. Derek sipped his coffee again. She knew about Morales. She didn't know the names, but she knew he wasn't in WITSEC. She told someone, and that someone got hurt. That's why she stopped volunteering. Anthony's jaw clenched. She was trying to help. She always was, Derek said softly. She helped me get out. Gave me her phone number, yes. But more than that, she gave me yours. Told me that if anything ever went sideways again, I had to call you. Anthony sat down beside him, finally. Why didn't you? I didn't think you'd believe me, Derek said. I thought I'd already burned that bridge. But when Keene brought you in by mistake, man, I figured maybe somebody was trying to send a different kind of message. Not just to scare you, but to force your hand. Anthony looked at him, eyes sharp. Why would they want me digging? I don't know. Maybe not all of them do. Maybe one of them wants the truth out, but can't say it themselves. Or maybe someone's cleaning house, and you're the blade. That doesn't make any sense. No, Derek said. But neither does a street cop dragging a federal prosecutor into court without checking his ID. Back at the office that afternoon, Anthony walked in through the garage level and took the freight elevator up, avoiding the usual entry points. When he reached his floor, his assistant stood up again. This time, her eyes were wide. There's another man in your office. Anthony exhaled, annoyed. Who now? He didn't give a name. Just showed me this. She held up a card. Black. No seal. No letters. Just matte black stock with a faint watermark, too smudged to read. Anthony's skin prickled. He walked into his office and closed the door behind him. The man inside was older. Black suit. Thin-framed glasses. Neatly trimmed white beard. He looked like someone's grandfather, but he moved like someone trained to disappear. Mr. Stokes, he said quietly. Let me guess, Anthony said. You're with a department that doesn't have a name. The man smiled. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to warn you. Anthony raised his eyebrows. Aren't those the same thing? Not always. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive, laying it gently on Anthony's desk. Everything you think you know is only the outer circle. There's another level beneath it. The operation your mother stumbled into. You're in it now. Whether you want to be or not. Anthony didn't pick up the drive. I need names, he said. And I need proof. You already have both, the man said. You just haven't connected them yet. Then he stood, walked to the door, and paused. One more thing, he said, not turning around. When they realize you've seen that drive, they won't come for you first. He opened the door and stepped out. They'll come for the people you trust. Anthony didn't move for a full minute after the door clicked shut. The flash drive sat on his desk like a live grenade. Outside the glass walls of his office, the floor buzzed with the usual late afternoon energy, phones ringing, interns rushing, attorneys muttering over coffee. But inside, it was dead quiet. Still, his assistant walked by, paused at the door. You good? Anthony looked up. Yeah, thanks. She nodded, unconvinced, and walked off. He picked up the flash drive with 2 fingers like it might bite, then tucked it into his pocket. He wasn't opening that here. Not at work. Not where someone could track it. Not when he didn't know who was listening. He logged out of his workstation, grabbed his coat, and left without a word. He took the long way home. 2 train transfers, a rideshare, then a 10-minute walk. He cut through alleyways and doubled back once just to see if anyone was following. It felt paranoid, but every step hummed with a tight, electric certainty. They're watching now. At his brownstone, he pulled down the shades, shut off his phone, and powered up his old laptop, one never connected to Wi-Fi, used only for trial prep back when he still wrote closing statements by hand. He inserted the flash drive and held his breath. It opened with no password, just a single folder. /Lantham/redacted/. Inside, dozens of files. PDFs, JPEGs, audio clips. No names on the documents, just codes. No metadata. Someone had stripped it all clean. He opened the first file. A memo. Confidential interdepartmental directive. Subject, Operation Nightward. Date, August 11th, 2014. Status, compartmentalized access only. He scrolled down. Words leapt out at him. Test operations on domestic soil. Utilization of criminal assets under monitored control. Plausible deniability via municipal law enforcement. Record expungement authorization, level 3. It read like a blueprint for systemic corruption, government-sanctioned silence, and power games wearing the face of law enforcement. His heart pounded as he opened a second file. This one was an image. Black and white. Grainy. It showed a man sitting in a small interrogation room. Shackled. Face bruised. The timestamp, October 2014. The name on the bottom corner, half cut off. Lon. Anthony leaned back in his chair. They knew Derek. They'd used him. And when they were done, they'd discarded him. Or worse, set him up as a distraction. But the real stinger came when he opened the third file. It was a voice recording. A woman. Soft. Calm. You're making these kids into pawns. If you think I'm going to stay quiet about this, you don't know me at all. His stomach dropped. It was his mother. He hit pause and stared at the screen. He hadn't heard her voice since she passed. And now here it was, locked inside a secret government archive, embedded in a program no one was supposed to know existed. He replayed the line. You don't know me at all. His throat tightened. She knew. She knew about this years ago. She must have gotten too close. Asked the wrong questions. Maybe even helped someone leak something. He played the clip again, this time letting it run. There was another voice. Male. Cold. Controlled. You're interfering with national security. I'm protecting my community, she replied. That used to matter. Anthony slammed the laptop shut. His hands were shaking. He needed someone to help him parse this, to confirm it was real, not some elaborate fake. And there was only one person he trusted enough to see it. Wexler. He grabbed the drive, threw on his coat, and headed out into the night. She met him at an abandoned coffee shop in Bed-Stuy, closed for remodeling, but Wexler had a key. Her cousin owned the place. The windows were blacked out. The chairs were stacked on the tables. But the lights in the back still worked. He dropped the flash drive on the counter. Whoever that man was, he wasn't bluffing. She plugged it into her own device and began to scan the files. Her face changed within minutes. Jesus, she whispered. This isn't just dirty cops. This is federal authorization. Deep programs. Deniable funding. Names I've never even heard of. Look at this. She turned the screen toward him. A flowchart, federal law enforcement, private intelligence firms, and shell programs operated under Homeland Security, all branching from something coded as Program 68NW. Wexler scrolled down. They used street-level busts to test behavioral responses. Drug sweeps in poor neighborhoods. They monitored how informants reacted to pressure, who broke, who ran, who kept secrets. Anthony frowned. So it was psychological warfare. On U.S. citizens. She nodded. And your mom? Looks like she figured it out. Anthony stared at the chart. And now they're watching me the same way. Wexler leaned in close. They don't just want you to stop, she said. They want to break you. An hour later, Anthony was back home. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the edge of his bed, replaying the audio of his mother again and again. Her strength. Her defiance. The quiet fire in her voice. He realized then that she hadn't just been caught in the middle of something. She had stood up to it. And now, whether he wanted to or not, it was his turn. The next morning, the phone rang at 6:14 a.m. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Stokes, the voice said. We warned you. Click. For hours later, Wexler was missing. Her apartment. Door unlocked. No signs of struggle. Laptop gone. Badge still on the kitchen table. Anthony stood in her empty living room, heart pounding, ears ringing. He picked up her badge and turned it over in his hands. Then he looked at her fridge. A single note was stuck there under a magnet shaped like a saxophone. In Wexler's scrawled handwriting. If they take me, don't stop. Use the folder. Finish what your mother started. Anthony closed his eyes. They'd taken his ally. They'd tried to erase his mother. And they were coming for him next. But he wasn't running. Not now. Not ever. Anthony sat in the silence of Wexler's apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. She was gone. Just like that. The note on her fridge felt like a dying breath. A last instruction. Something she'd written not in panic, but with purpose. She knew this day was coming. And she'd prepared for it the only way she could. He took the folder she'd referenced, the same one she'd wrapped in a bodega bag just days ago, and flipped through it again. Her handwriting covered the margins now. Cross-referenced case numbers, map coordinates, red-inked arrows pointing to names circled in thick lines. One name kept appearing, Wallace Green. Retired. Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Quietly left office in 2016. No scandals, no press. Just disappeared into private life. Wexler had drawn a thick red circle around his name and underlined it twice. Anthony remembered the name. Green had been a fixture in the DOJ during the Obama years. No one ever talked about him like a player, but maybe that was the point. The ones that move the chess pieces don't brag about it. Wexler had scribbled one more note in the margin. Lives in Rhinebeck now. Upstate. Alone. Anthony exhaled. If Wallace Green was still breathing, and if Wexler was right, then he might be the last person alive who could pull this tangled mess into focus. He left the apartment just after dawn, took the A train to Penn Station, caught the next Amtrak to Rhine Cliff. The train hugged the Hudson River the whole way north, passing trees, cliffs, and small towns still sleeping under morning fog. He stared out the window, arms crossed, trying to bury the ache in his chest. This wasn't about a bad arrest anymore. It wasn't even about Keene. This was about his mother, and the government that tried to erase her. Wallace Green lived in a wide, weathered farmhouse just off Route 308, tucked behind a row of bare oak trees. The house looked abandoned, but smoke curled from the chimney and a beat-up Subaru sat in the gravel drive. Anthony walked up the porch steps and knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door creaked open. An old man with sunken eyes and liver spots blinked at him. You're early, the man said. Anthony froze. You were expecting me? I was expecting someone. The moment they took Wexler, I figured the next knock would be yours. He stepped aside. Come in. The inside of the house smelled like dust, books, and old coffee. Floorboards groaned underfoot. Boxes filled the corners. Documents, photos, old case binders from another life. Green moved slow but deliberate, like a man who hadn't stopped carrying the weight of something he'd done. You knew my mother, Anthony said, not sitting. Green looked up sharply, caught off guard for the first time. She was a good woman, he said. Better than most of us deserved. Did you work with her? Green shook his head. She didn't work for us. But she got too close. She saw things she wasn't supposed to see. Anthony pulled out the flash drive. She recorded this. You were part of that operation. Green sat heavily in a chair and stared at the floor. I helped start it. Anthony's blood went cold. You're the architect of this whole thing? Green didn't look proud. I was part of a joint initiative back in 2010, a response to rising gang activity in domestic urban zones. We pitched it as a way to preempt organized crime by inserting high-pressure informant programs into communities. Anthony stared. That's what you called it? Green nodded. We used locals. Threatened them with time, flipped them into sea ice. Ran psychological pressure tests, like rats in a maze. The goal was to identify behavioral thresholds. Who breaks? Who talks? Who fights? We told ourselves it was for the greater good. And it didn't matter if you ruined people's lives. Green's jaw clenched. No one asked that question. We believed if we got one big fish, the rest were acceptable losses. Anthony leaned in. What happened to Morales? Green hesitated. He was our mistake. He was supposed to testify against a group we couldn't touch any other way. But someone inside the bureau thought he might turn on us, too. So he disappeared. I didn't order it, but I didn't stop it either. And my mother? She tried to blow the whistle. Not publicly, but she spoke to the wrong person. I don't know who flagged her, but someone inside classified her as a domestic threat. We were told to back off, let another agency handle it. Anthony felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. So what now, he asked. You sit here and hope the storm passes? No, Green said. He got up, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Dropped it on the table. I've been keeping copies. Originals. Things even your flash drive doesn't have. Anthony opened it slowly. Photos. Signatures. Official memos. All stamped with DOJ, FBI, DHS. The real skeletons. Green looked at him. If you want to finish what your mother started, this is how you do it. That night, back in Brooklyn, Anthony opened the envelope again and laid everything out on the floor of his apartment. Wexler's folder. Green's documents. The audio. His mother's voice. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. This was about telling the story they tried to erase. About making the people who silenced her say her name. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A distorted voice. You have one shot. They know you went to Green. You won't get another chance. Then silence. Anthony sat back and stared at the map of names and dates taped to his wall. His jaw tightened. There would be no deals. No promotions. No walking away. They wanted silence. He was going to give them fire. At 4:03 a.m., Anthony opened a burner email account using a secured connection routed through 3 VPN layers, protocols he'd learned from an old case involving cybercrime out of Oakland. He attached the audio recording of his mother, a scanned copy of the DOJ directive from 2014, and one page from Green's envelope showing federal sign-off on Operation Nightward. He typed a single sentence. This program exists. Ask your DOJ contact about Operation 68 NW. Then he blind copied 17 journalists. Not the polished media faces who smiled through morning briefings. The real ones. The ones who dug into CIA renditions, offshore prisons, Flint's water crisis. People who burned bridges for the truth. He hit send. Then he shut the laptop, took a breath, and braced himself. At 6:11 a.m., the first call came in. It was the New York Times, a national security reporter who didn't waste time on pleasantries. Where did you get this? Anthony paused. Let's talk in person. Where? Courthouse steps. Southern District. Noon. He hung up before she could say no. At 8:24 a.m., Anthony walked into the U.S. Attorney's office for the last time. He didn't go to his desk. He went straight to his boss's office, Robert Langley, Southern District's chief. Langley was already at his desk, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside a stack of case files. He looked up, confused. Anthony, didn't expect you today. I won't be long. Langley gestured to the chair. Everything okay? Anthony closed the door behind him. I'm resigning. Langley blinked. You're what? Anthony dropped a letter on his desk. I'm going public with classified material. Material that links members of our own government to illegal domestic surveillance and manipulation of criminal informants. I'm not asking permission. Langley stared at him. You're not serious. I am. Langley looked down at the letter, then back up. Do you know what this could do to you? Anthony smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, but I know what it could do to them. Langley stood up, slowly. Anthony, be smart. Let this go. You're angry. You were targeted, I get it. But you're about to burn your entire career to the ground. Anthony walked to the door, hand on the knob. Then maybe something useful will finally grow out of the ashes. He didn't wait for a reply. By 10 a.m., Twitter had caught the scent. A small account with 8,000 followers posted a screenshot of the leaked memo. Then a journalist in D.C. confirmed a quote from the audio. Another said they'd heard whispers about Operation 68 NW for years, but could never pin it down. Within the hour, it was trending. Anthony's inbox filled with interview requests. News vans started circling the courthouse. But Anthony didn't want interviews. He wanted accountability. At 11:58 a.m., he stood on the courthouse steps in a charcoal suit, no tie, folder in hand. The crowd in front of him buzzed, journalists, law clerks, activists, officers standing stiff in the background. Microphones pointed like weapons. He stepped forward. I'm Anthony Stokes, he said, his voice clear. Until this morning, I served as an assistant U.S. attorney in this very courthouse. 3 weeks ago, I was wrongfully arrested by a city cop who claimed I fit the description of a suspect. That arrest wasn't a mistake. It was part of a pattern, one I've traced through sealed documents, erased records, and buried testimony. Cameras flashed. He held up the folder. This file contains the outlines of a federal program designed to manipulate communities, weaponize informants, and silence those who tried to expose it. It happened here, in New York, in Baltimore, in Chicago, in cities across this country where voices were ignored because they came from neighborhoods the government chose to forget. He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. My mother, Darlene Stokes, tried to expose this years ago. They threatened her, silenced her, and now they've come after me, after my colleagues, after the people trying to protect the truth. He stepped back. I will not be silent. The crowd erupted. That night, news outlets ran stories with titles like Federal Prosecutor Blows Whistle on DOJ Black Ops and Leaked Memo Ties Feds to Covert Informant Program. The audio of his mother's voice aired on national television. People cried listening to it. Others called it a hoax. But it spread and couldn't be pulled back. At 3:17 a.m., his burner phone rang. He answered without speaking. You've made your move, said the voice from before. They're deciding now how to respond. I'm not afraid. Good. Because it gets worse before it gets better. Click. Anthony stared at the ceiling of his apartment, lit only by street lamp glow through half-closed blinds. He should have felt afraid. He didn't. He felt ready. And then his doorbell rang. Once. Sharp. Alone. He grabbed the baseball bat from behind his door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just silence. Then a voice from the hallway. Faint. Female. Stokes. His eyes widened. He opened the door. There, bruised and breathing hard, stood Lauren Wexler. Alive. She looked like hell. But she was standing. He caught her before she fell. I have something, she whispered, eyes fluttering. But we're not the only ones looking for it. What is it? Wexler looked up at him. They kept video, Anthony. His blood ran cold. They recorded the experiments. Wexler's body was trembling. Anthony eased her onto the couch, grabbed a bottle of water, and threw a blanket over her shoulders. She looked like she'd been through a war. Face pale, lips split, dried blood at her temple. Her clothes were soaked in rain and sweat. She clutched the flash drive in her hand like it was her last lifeline. I ran, she said, voice hoarse. They had me in some kind of holding facility upstate. Not jail. No charges. Just locked doors. No windows. Military grade, everything. Anthony crouched in front of her. How'd you get out? Her cracked lip twitched into a smile. I waited until the guards changed. There were only two, and they weren't expecting me to fight. One had a gun. I took it. You shot him? No. I broke his knee and ran. Anthony stared at her in awe. Jesus, Wex. She leaned forward, still breathing hard, and held out the flash drive. They kept footage. Actual surveillance. From the program. Operations in Baltimore, Chicago, Oakland. Informants being handled. Judges being pressured. Some of it has names. Faces. You were right, Anthony. This wasn't just one rogue operation. It was a machine. And your mother. Anthony took the flash drive, heart pounding. They were afraid of her. Wexler finished. They loaded the files onto his offline laptop. The drive was encrypted, but Wexler had already cracked it using software she'd hidden in the body cam of her NYPD gear. She'd planned for this. Every worst-case scenario. The first video opened on a feed timestamped 2015. It showed a room. Plywood walls. 2 chairs. 1 camera in the corner. A boy, 16, maybe 17, sat cuffed, looking terrified. A man in a federal windbreaker paced in front of him. You flip for us, the man said, or we bury you. You think your friends outside care what happens to you. The boy started crying. Wexler fast-forwarded. There were hours of footage. The boy eventually agreed. Said he'd name people. Said he'd wear the wire. The handler handed him a prepaid phone and a burner ID badge. The timestamp changed. 6 weeks later. A body bag. Same kid. Overdose staged with planted fentanyl. Anthony looked away. They used him, Wexler said. Then discarded him when the op failed. Clip after clip. City after city. All the same shape. People of color, young, afraid, caught between jail time and exploitation. Coerced into snitching. Threatened. Offered deals. Some died. Some vanished. A few simply stopped appearing in records at all. But the worst was still to come. Wexler clicked one more folder. Labeled DS_Baltimore_2016. Anthony's hand hovered over the touchpad. He clicked. A still image loaded first. A community center hallway. His mother, surrounded by teenagers, just like the photo Wexler had found before. Only this time, she wasn't smiling. She was arguing. There was audio, but the camera angle was too far to read lips clearly. She was pointing. Then someone entered the frame. Not local. Not anyone Anthony recognized. But the posture, the haircut, it screamed federal. The man handed her a folder. She refused to take it. The man said something, angry now. Leaning in. She stepped back, grabbed a phone off the wall. The timestamp stopped. Wexler looked at him. That's the last known footage of her on any official system. 3 days later, she quit the center. She stopped answering calls. And someone flagged her name. Anthony stared at the screen, his chest caving in. They scared her. Wexler nodded. But she didn't stop. She clicked another video. No footage this time. Just audio. Voicemail recording. March 2016, unsent. Darlene Stokes, voicemail. If anything happens to me, don't trust them, baby. I know you're busy. I know you got your life. But if you ever start to pull threads, you'll find them. And if you do, finish it. You hear me? Finish it. I'm proud of you. The message cut off. Anthony was silent. Then he stood and walked into his bedroom. Wexler sat there, unsure if she should follow. When he returned, he was wearing a black hoodie, jeans, and a calm expression that terrified her more than anger ever could. What are you doing? She asked. Getting ready. For what? For war. They didn't sleep. By 3 a.m., they'd identified 3 active agents tied to the program still working in DOJ oversight. By 5 a.m., they found emails between Green and a shell firm connected to a senator, one Anthony recognized from the Judiciary Committee. They were everywhere. But now, so was the evidence. At 9 a.m., Anthony walked into CNN headquarters carrying 2 identical USB drives. By noon, they had copies on every major network's desk. By 2 p.m., the White House press secretary was ducking questions she didn't understand yet. And by 4 p.m., someone retaliated. Anthony's phone rang. An old contact from Homeland Security. A guy who owed him a favor. I'm calling from a burner. I can't talk long. Go. There's an order out. For your detainment. Not an arrest. They're calling it protective custody. Anthony exhaled. How many people are involved? Too many. But listen, one of them wants this to end. They left a name on a back channel. Whose name? Langley. Anthony froze. His former boss. That night, Anthony and Wexler stared at the folder of documents they hadn't opened yet. The Langley file. Stamped classified. She looked at him. You ready for what's in there? Anthony's hand hovered over the first page. Not even close. He opened it. And what they saw inside would change everything. Langley hadn't just known. He hadn't just authorized it. He had built the cover-up. Anthony stared at the first page of the Langley file as if it were written in a foreign language. Wexler read over his shoulder, whispering every other word aloud like she couldn't believe them either. OP 68N W Oversight Coordination. Robert Langley, a USA Southern District Primary Liaison. Responsibilities: internal case suppression, redirection of whistleblower complaints, sealing court records, managing media containment. Anthony's mouth went dry. Langley hadn't just been aware. He'd been the fixer. The very person Anthony had gone to for help, who'd looked him in the eye, who'd warned him not to ruin his career, had been the one pulling strings, managing the cleanup, deciding which cases got buried and which names got erased. Anthony slowly set the page down. Wexler looked at him. We have to take this public. Not just the program him. If Langley goes down, this whole thing unravels. Anthony nodded, but something in his eyes had shifted. This isn't just about exposing him anymore. It's about making sure he can't slip away. Not like Morales. Not like the rest. Wexler tilted her head. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we do what he did to my mother. Only this time, we aim it at the truth. 2 hours later, Anthony stood outside Langley's Upper West Side brownstone. He hadn't called. He hadn't warned. He didn't need to. Langley opened the door in a bathrobe, surprised but still too composed. A man who knew exactly how many secrets he could afford to keep. Anthony, he said coolly, you should go home. You're making this worse for yourself. Anthony held up a small black box. The body cam he'd pulled from Wexler's gear. Recording light on. Bright red dot blinking. You're going to talk, Anthony said. On camera. Right now. Langley narrowed his eyes. I'm not doing a damn thing. You are, Anthony said. Because if you don't, I'll release everything, including the files with your initials on the directive from 2014, and the transfers you authorized, and the signatures you thought no one would trace. Langley stepped back. I'm not afraid of leaks. You should be, Anthony said. You're not the one they'll protect. You're disposable now. You're a liability. Langley's jaw clenched. You think you're exposing corruption? You're dismantling a structure that's kept this country from falling apart. Anthony stepped forward, close enough to see the sweat rising on Langley's temple. You've lied. You've buried witnesses. You let my mother get flagged, even though she did nothing but help kids. And then you watched me walk into your office, day after day, while you smiled in my face. Langley didn't respond. Anthony lowered his voice. You helped erase people, but I'm going to make sure they remember you. They left with the footage. Langley's refusal, his words, his anger, enough to raise suspicion, enough to feed the storm. That night, Anthony and Wexler uploaded a second wave of evidence. This time, directly to a secure journalism network, the kind built for whistleblowers. Not the headlines. The deep dives. They included the Langley file, the videos, the names. Within an hour, it exploded. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Nightward Files. Hashtag Justice for Darlene. Hashtag Who Killed the Truth. News outlets confirmed Langley's federal ties. Civil rights attorneys went live on Instagram, calling for DOJ resignations. Members of Congress issued urgent statements, some shocked, others suspiciously silent. Langley didn't show up to work the next morning. By daybreak, the FBI was at Anthony's door, but they weren't there to arrest him. They were there to ask for a meeting. Wexler stared through the peephole. Well, that's new. Anthony cracked the door open. What do you want? A woman in a Navy suit stepped forward. Her badge read SSA Denise Powell. We're forming a task force, she said. Independent of DOJ. Under congressional oversight. We want you on it. Anthony blinked. Is this a joke? We've got senators on record demanding an investigation. Public pressure is real now. We don't want another Hoover-era scandal on our hands. But we need someone inside who understands what we're up against. Wexler stepped beside him. You asking us to clean up the mess Langley made? Powell hesitated. I'm asking you to help expose all of it. Anthony stared at her for a long time. He didn't trust her. Not fully. But for the first time, they were asking him. Later that day, Wexler returned to her precinct in silence, her reinstatement already in motion. Internal Affairs had called off the investigation that had put her on leave. Her apartment had been swept clean. She had her badge back. But she didn't feel like a cop anymore. She felt like a witness. Anthony walked the same courthouse steps where it all began. This time, no cuffs, no cameras. Just him, a folder, and a path forward. The DOJ was under fire. The Senate Judiciary Committee had called an emergency session. Whistleblower protection groups were huddling with Anthony's lawyers. Civil rights organizations demanded a full accounting of Operation Nightward and every off-the-books asset tied to it. And still, one question echoed louder than the rest. Who signed off? Langley wasn't the top. He never had been. There was still someone higher. Someone who wrote the checks, stamped the seals. Green had hinted at a name, but never said it. And now, with everything out in the open, that name might finally come to light. Anthony looked at Wexler beside him and nodded. We're close, he said. She nodded back. Closer than they want. He turned to walk inside, past security, past the marble walls, past the history that tried to silence his. They took his mother's voice. He gave it back to the world. The hearing room was colder than it needed to be. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Murmurs filled the air, journalists clicking away on laptops, cameras stationed in tight rows behind the velvet rope. Anthony sat at the witness table, spine straight, eyes forward. He wore a Navy suit, the same one he'd worn the day he was wrongfully cuffed. Poetic symmetry. Across from him sat 12 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, half pretending they hadn't read the files, the other half pretending they understood them. Behind them, the DOJ's new interim liaison, some clean-faced appointee from Chicago, tried to look like he hadn't just inherited a bomb. A thin woman in a red blazer leaned into her mic. Mr. Stokes, thank you for appearing. You understand this hearing is under oath. Yes, Senator, Anthony said, voice steady. She nodded. You may begin your statement. He unfolded the paper in front of him, but didn't read it. I was told once, he began, that the only thing more dangerous than knowing the truth is speaking it. The room shifted. A few heads looked up. I'm here today because my mother believed people deserve to be seen, not just as suspects or statistics or threats, but as humans. She volunteered in communities where systems had already given up, places no budget ever reached. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't wear a badge. She just showed up. He let the silence settle. She uncovered something she wasn't supposed to see. A federal program using Black and brown communities as test subjects, pressuring kids into informant roles, letting them die when the experiments failed. My mother tried to speak out. They silenced her. He looked down the line of senators. Then they came for me. Murmurs. Shuffling. One senator scowled, but didn't speak. I was dragged into court in handcuffs, held overnight, misidentified, and logged as a criminal. But I'm not the only one. Thousands of people without titles or access or camera crews, have been chewed up by the same machine. And no one ever asked why. Now the room was quiet. Anthony nodded once. Well, I did. Outside the building, a crowd had formed. Protesters, activists, students, journalists. Photos of Darlene Stokes printed on signs. Justice for all, written in thick Sharpie. Inside, Wexler stood behind the last row of seats in the gallery, arms crossed, watching her former partner testify to a room full of people who'd once ignored his calls. This wasn't just about the files anymore. This was about power, and whether it could be held accountable. The hearing stretched for hours. Senators questioned Anthony about the legality of the leaks, the chain of custody for the documents, whether any of it had been fabricated. He held his ground. Methodical, calm. Every answer laced with clarity, never apology. When one senator accused him of endangering national security, Anthony didn't blink. What's more dangerous, he asked, leaking classified information or hiding programs that prey on your own citizens? The room fell quiet again. By evening, his face was on every screen in the country. But it wasn't the footage of the hearing that caught fire. It was a different clip. One the media unearthed from the leaked videos Wexler had recovered. It was Darlene, speaking to a room full of boys, maybe 15 or 16 years old. She had a Bible in one hand, but she wasn't preaching. She was telling the truth. You don't have to be what they call you, she said. You don't have to play the part they wrote for you before you were even born. You get to choose. You always get to choose. The video went viral. Millions watched it within hours. Hashtags changed. From hashtag Nightward Files to hashtag She Told Us. That night, Anthony sat on the roof of his building with Wexler beside him, both of them silent, staring out over the Brooklyn skyline. Neither said anything for a while. Then Wexler handed him her phone. Email came through from someone buried in oversight. Anthony read the message. One line. Langley wasn't the top. The man you're looking for retired in 2017. Initials, J.D. He read it again. J.D. Do you know who that is? Wexler asked. Anthony nodded slowly. Yeah. He'd seen that name once. On a memo Green had nearly shredded, back when the operation was still theory and not nightmare. He'd ignored it then, thought it didn't matter. John Darnell, Anthony said, former Assistant Deputy Director of National Intelligence, oversaw civilian data collection and urban threat modeling. Wexler's eyebrows shot up. He's still alive? He's very alive. And sitting on a private security board outside D.C. She sat back. We going to knock? Anthony didn't smile. We're going to bury him in truth. But before they could act, something shifted. That night, while the city slept, an unmarked SUV pulled up outside Wexler's apartment. 3 men stepped out. Military bearing. No badges. They picked the lock. They didn't know Wexler had set up an off-grid motion detector rig to her burner phone. She was halfway out the back window by the time they reached her kitchen. Anthony picked her up in a rented car 2 blocks away. She was bleeding from her hand. You all right? He asked. Yeah, she said. But they're done being polite. The next morning, the media exploded again. Langley had disappeared. No statement. No resignation. Just gone. Word leaked that he'd been placed under informal federal protection. Code for he knows too much, and we can't risk the trial. Anthony knew what that meant. The story had reached its boiling point, and they were done hiding. At 11:06 a.m., a new leak appeared online. Not from Anthony. Not from Wexler. A whistleblower inside ODNI had released a trove of internal messages. Emails between John Darnell and Langley. Audio of briefings where they described urban communities as resilience targets and referred to informants as expendable social probes. Wexler stared at the screen in disgust. They turned people into lab rats. Anthony's phone buzzed again. A text. He's going to ground. If you want Darnell, now's your shot. No name. Just coordinates. Somewhere in Maryland. He stood. We're not done. Wexler grabbed her jacket. Let's finish it. They left the city that night. No press. No protection. Just the truth. And everything it was about to burn. They drove through the back roads of Maryland with the headlights off for miles at a time, cutting across the state like ghosts. Anthony gripped the wheel, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Wexler sat beside him, Glock on her thigh, hands steady despite the tremble in her breath. Neither had spoken since crossing into and Arundel County. The GPS coordinates led them to a wooded property half a mile off the main road. No mailbox. No neighbors. A single gated path just wide enough for a truck. Anthony parked 2 blocks away. They approached on foot. A faint glow spilled through the tree line. A 2-story cabin with a wraparound porch and blackout curtains. A generator hummed somewhere behind it. This the place? Wexler whispered. Anthony nodded. Darnell's been hiding here. Off the grid. Government knows. They're letting him sit in the dark and rot. Why? Because as long as he stays quiet, they don't have to admit what he did. They crouched near the edge of the trees. I'm not leaving with just answers, Anthony said. Wexler glanced sideways. You planning to kill him? No. I'm going to record him. She sighed, relieved. Good. I'd hate to have to shoot you after all this. They waited until the lights dimmed, until the faint rustle of movement suggested Darnell was alone. No guards. No cameras. Just the sound of a man living in quiet shame. Anthony stepped up to the front door, heart hammering. He knocked once. Silence. Then footsteps. The door cracked open. John Darnell stared out, white-haired, wearing a flannel shirt and sweatpants. He didn't flinch. I wondered how long it would take. Anthony didn't blink. We need to talk. Darnell looked over his shoulder. Saw Wexler in the shadows. He stepped aside. 5 minutes. That's all I'll give you. The inside of the cabin was bare. A single table, 2 chairs, dusty shelves. A cold fireplace and stacks of canned food. You're not hiding, Anthony said. You're waiting. Darnell sat down slowly. I know what you want. No, I don't think you do. Anthony pulled out the body cam again. Set it on the table. Hit record. I want you to say it. Darnell stared at the blinking red light. Then he nodded, slow. Tired. My name is John Darnell. Former Assistant Deputy Director of National Intelligence. From 2010 to 2017, I oversaw an experimental domestic program, Operation 68 in W, also known in internal records as Operation Night Ward. Wexler stepped closer, arms crossed. I authorized the use of coercive informant recruitment in over a dozen cities, including Baltimore, New York, Chicago, Oakland, Atlanta. I classified protest leaders, community organizers, and volunteers as disruption variables. Some were placed under surveillance. Others were discredited. One of them was Darlene Stokes. Anthony's throat closed, but he kept the camera steady. She was flagged for attempting to expose a network of informants recruited under illegal threat of federal prosecution. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't even political. She just asked too many questions. Wexler's voice cut in. Why not stop it? Why keep it going? Darnell didn't look at her. Because it worked. And because no one with power wanted to know the cost. Anthony leaned in. Do you regret it? Darnell paused. Yes. But regret's not enough, is it? Anthony turned off the camera. No. They left the cabin without another word. Darnell didn't follow. He simply shut the door and turned off the lights behind him. By the time they hit the highway again, the sky was turning pale gray. The confession went live at dawn. Within minutes, the video swept through every major outlet, every social media feed, every inbox. Darnell's name hit trending before breakfast. The Department of Justice issued a vague statement about ongoing investigations. Langley's lawyer tried to distance him. A senator resigned. Another called for a federal truth commission. But none of it stopped what came next. Anthony sat at the same courthouse where it began. This time, not as a defendant, not as a prosecutor, Just a man who told the truth and refused to let it be buried. A plaque had been installed outside, in memory of Darlene Stokes, community leader, truth teller, mother. He stood alone for a while, hand on the edge of it, before someone stepped up beside him. Wexler, you think this sticks? She asked. Some of it will. The rest? That's on whoever comes next. They stood there in silence for a beat. You ever think about going back? She asked. To the DOJ? No. To fighting. But this time, on your terms. Anthony looked out at the city. I'm already doing it. 6 months later, Anthony ran a nonprofit investigative unit. Independent. Grant-funded. Built to expose the kinds of programs the government wanted forgotten. Wexler joined him after leaving the force. Their first case uncovered another hidden informant network in Detroit. But nothing hit like the beginning. Like Darlene's voice. Like the echo of what she'd left behind. One night, Anthony found himself playing that last message again. Finish it. I'm proud of you. He whispered back. I did, Mama. And this time, he knew it was true.